Bronny James is staying in the NBA draft, and mock drafts are all over the place on him. Some have him going high in the lottery, others have him missing out on the first round entirely. But the consensus seems to be that he's going to go somewhere in the first round, with the likelihood of being late in the lottery to just after that being the most likely scenario. The question today that we're going to discuss is he worth that? And we're going to look at it in two ways, really. One, we're going to look at it just based off of his own merit. Is Bronny James, on his own game and accolades, worth that top 15 to 16 pick? Does he have the skills to translate into a potential impact player down the road? And then at the very end, we're going to talk a little bit around the extenuating circumstances and why, there's more to consider than just his game. He's a polarizing figure right now. Most people have an opinion on LeBron James, and at this point in the basketball community, most people have an opinion on Bronny James as well. But today we're talking Bronny, we're going to talk his game, we're going to see if he is worth, a first round or even a lottery pick. Let's start this entire video out on a positive note. So let's talk first about where was Bronny good. He, played a limited amount of time at USC. He did not get as much run as many thought he was going to get throughout the year. But where did he excel? And the first area that I want to talk about is he was capable off the dribble. So he was actually, one of the statistically more efficient players shooting off the dribble jumpers. So last year, he shot around 43% on off dribble jumpers from both 3 and from 2, which put him, pretty high up in terms of efficiency. And when you look at refined statistics, he was actually 93rd percentile in points per possession on off the dribble shots, which is a really desirable trait in the NBA. It's something that modern offenses need. They need guys who can create their own offense, and at least in a limited sample size, Bronny was able to do that. So he did look effective, finding his own jump shot, which is good, and it's something that is going to translate well over to the NBA. So that's a little feather in his cap, checking in the box, so to speak. So definitely something scouts are going to like, definitely something I liked watching on film. He looked pretty natural. His release looked good coming off of that. So all in all, pretty good shooter off the dribble. Next, athletically, he does check some boxes there as well. He's a good leaper. He has a pretty high vertical, had about a 40-inch vert at the combine. That's pretty impressive. A good frame overall, like he's a pretty bulky kid and, definitely has some definition and some real strength on his frame. But, as someone who was listed at 6'4" throughout their entire prep career and through college, to measure 6'1" at the combine without shoes is a little concerning, especially when you're talking about someone who's going to profile as a wing defender as well and has to be able to contest and close out on threes. That's a little concerning for me. So when you're talking about Bronny James, he's somebody that can be physical on the perimeter on defense because of that strength that he has. He also uses some of that athleticism really well in terms of making plays defensively. He can shoot gaps. He's able to cut passing lanes really well, able to get out in transition and attack the rim going the other way. He can also block some shots pretty effectively as a weak side help guy or as a chase down opportunity individual. There's a lot he can do defensively. I'm not sure how well that translates over to the NBA game, where he's going to be going up against, much bigger, more athletic players, who have experience and skill on him as well. So while his athleticism is definitely a plus and is probably worthy of a first round pick on its own, it's not something that is a big of a standout as you might have anticipated being prior to this year. The last real big net positive I want to talk about is he had really good court vision. He was able to operate effectively with the ball in his hands and not just looking for his own shot. So he was able to get his teammates involved, make the right play throughout the course of the game. I think he navigated pick and rolls really well, was able to kind of get paint touches and find open shooters on the wing and the corner. He was able to make the correct pass. And when I say make the correct pass, I'm not just talking about highlight reel passes. I'm talking about he's intelligent enough to know when to swing the ball, when the defense is rotating. he's able to make that extra pass quickly, even though it's an easy one, to keep the defense moving, to find an open shooter. And he's a real heady player in that sense. He had a 2-to-1 assist to turnover ratio last year. So, in limited minutes, playing in a high major conference, that's a good number. That's something that I think you would want to see. That's something that is valuable to NBA teams, especially when you're going to come in and play off the ball a ton and be counted on to continue and have some continuity within an offense. So I think that's a feather in his cap. I think teams are going to like to see that. It still lingers the question, though, do all these positives alone make him worth that first round pick? So let's shift gears for a second and let's start talking about kind of some of the obvious negatives. Like, what are some of the things that just teams are not going to like? By far, the biggest negative for Bronny last year was, even in the limited minutes that he saw over the course of the year, he was wildly inefficient, particularly on catch and shoot jump shots. I think he shot 19% on catch and shoot jump shots on about 45 attempts overall. Not great. The shot quality wasn't very good. You're going to see interspersed throughout this dialogue some clips of some misses, and from the type of shot he was taking, they were very rushed. They were kind of get me involved type shots, which is not ideal. It's not something that you really want to see from a guy who is a heady player like that. Like, you'd rather see the game come to him. At the rim, he was okay, not fantastic. As a shooter overall, just left so much to be desired. Now, he's salvaging this a bit. So at the Combine, there were multiple reports coming out recently that I think in his three-point star shooting drill, he shot about 75%, which was fantastic. And perhaps, getting out of the flow of that season and getting a bit of a change of scenery is going to be, impactful enough for him, to make some changes, in his approach and just become a more efficient player overall. So while he's making strides, I just know that this is going to be the biggest net detractor, as well as his health history and, just his inability to be a true impact player at USC. And lastly, I just want to take a second and talk about, the situation that Bronny faced last year. So in early July, or late July, he had the cardiac arrest incident at USC getting ready in the offseason and was completely shut down. I mean, once that happened, they had to get a diagnosis, get a treatment plan, get everything in order for him to even have the possibility of playing again. Fast forward, it's not until early December that he's actually cleared to play and to rejoin the team and kind of get back in the swing of things. And if you've played basketball, especially at the college level, how much happens between July and December. Like, the season's already started, guys have chemistry, a rotation, not to mention all of the, X's and O's that get put in between that time. The amount of time that you have to practice and develop and earn trust and buy-in from the coaching staff, he had none of that. So it's tough. He didn't really get a fair shake at USC, didn't get to really present himself in the way that I'm sure he would want to. But by all accounts now, he is healthy. It shouldn't be that big of a risk for NBA GMs from a health perspective. So I think you have to approach last season's numbers with a bit of caution. He didn't have the role he probably would have had he stayed healthy the whole time. And then he was just kind of thrown into the fire after being out for 5 months. So proceed with caution when you look at some of these negatives that we've talked about, and realize that there's probably more there than you see. So just word of advice, take it for what it is, but give last year's stats some leniency here. Okay, so to answer the question of the video, is Bronny worth a lottery pick based on all of the evidence strictly on him that we have at our disposal? And I think if you're being objective, that answer has to be no. You haven't seen enough. What you have seen gives you enough concern to maybe think that end of the first round is kind of the ceiling for him, where you would see him go if he was just a regular guy. And in all likelihood, he might not even be a guy that gets drafted. Just based on what we've seen, he probably would have been better suited to go back to college. So, no. I don't think that he, from what we know right now, is worthy of a lottery pick. I think he has the ceiling to potentially, you look back and say, man, how did, that guy was definitely worth a lottery pick. So teams draft on that sometimes, but again, on his own merits, not quite worthy of that. But as we all know in the James family, there are some extenuating circumstances, and let's talk about those for a minute. So if you are an NBA team and you have a lottery pick and you know that if you draft Bronny, LeBron is overwhelmingly likely to come and join your team, okay, that changes things. He's worth a lottery pick. I mean you look at it just from a basketball perspective, where LeBron is still a high caliber player, obviously in the decline of his career, but still helps any team he joins. Like, let's be 100% clear and upfront about that. Teams are going to be better if LeBron joins their team. Like, absolute certainty, absolute truth on that. But then you look at the economic impact of all of this, and if LeBron joins your team, the amount of ticket sales, media coverage, just overall hype around your team and fan base is going to be game changing, especially for small to mid market teams if they have that opportunity. So yeah, in that sense, he is worth it. And it's, some people will call it nepotism, other people will call it, riding the coattails of his dad, and maybe that's the case. But I challenge you to look at it, a little more objectively and understand that some of those things are out of Bronny's control. LeBron wants to play with his son. That's certainly within his control, and that's certainly fine. So when you put those two things together, it's hard to put the blame and impetus on Bronny when it's really just a culmination of a larger circumstance. But you're going to see a team take him in the lottery. I don't really see a world where that doesn't happen. I think the Lakers, just outside of it, will be his floor. But it'll be interesting to see. So what do you guys think? Let me know. Where do you think Bronny ends up going? Where do you think he should be going? You can kind of look at it the way I did. Where do you think he would go on his own merits? And where do you predict he'll actually go in the draft? I appreciate everyone being here, taking a look at this. We're going to move more of our coverage towards this NBA draft coming up. I wanted to get this one out of the way before we move on to anything else. So again, appreciate it. If you found this video interesting, please like the video, subscribe to the channel. I really appreciate the community. We're starting to grow in some of the comments we've gotten on other videos. So I will see you guys on the next one. Let me know which prospect you think I should do.